Ruslan.
Bryson came out with a record. It's doing amazing, and his supporter base is sheesh. Them folks, man, they rock out with that dude. I think he's like #1 on iTunes, #3 on the Christian charts, or vice versa, Christian rap charts, whatever. Nevertheless, we did this video yesterday, and I wanted to tie this in because I really did want to get your thoughts. And listen, we be talking about stuff on here that are, again, non-essential issues, right? So, I don't know, secular music, the if there's free will, or is it all election? Is it, you know, these different topics, right? We've been doing a series called Stop Quoting That Verse. And the passage we covered yesterday was Malachi 3, and it was me, Pastor Roy, Pastor Jason Mayfield, Trey Van Camp, and Jason Mayfield. And it was a good conversation, I thought. And we were talking about this idea of a tithe. Is a tithe required? What is a tithe? So on and so forth. And regardless of what the topic is, women in ministry, whatever, I don't really be knowing that folks be this triggered about different topics. Like, some of you guys be really passionate, really triggered. And I just kind of present different points of views, and that's what we did. Pastor Roy Dockery didn't believe in the literal tithe and that is applicable for today. However, he believed in financial stewardship, financial responsibility. Pastor Jason Mayfield took the position that he did believe that it was applicable for today. Trey and myself were kind of like in between, right? We're kind of like, we don't know. So in that conversation, I saw the comments, and the comments, of course, folks were extremely triggered. I didn't quite understand why. And then I started asking questions, and then I learned more and more that, listen, there are folks that are coming from a place where they have been spiritually abused by churches that didn't manage their tithe well. They've been manipulated to tithe before, paying bills. And that's a very, very, very personal thing for them, right? Personal thing for them. And then there's folks on the other side who have lived out the principle of generosity, lived out the principle of giving, and have seen how amazing it is when you are being generous with your money. And it is a level of breakthrough for them. And so as I kind of thought about that, I started to understand more why folks are so passionate and why this can be such a divisive issue, which doesn't really have to be. And so the way I approached it and where I landed, more or less, is I landed in a place of like, listen, I believe we're under grace, not under law. I believe that we don't have to do anything. We get to do stuff. In the same way that I don't believe one has to keep a literal Sabbath, Friday to Saturday, even though some denominations do that, like the Seventh-day Adventists. Some people keep a literal Sabbath, or post-Messianic Jews. I don't think one has to do it that way, but I think it's a good principle, and I think you get to rest in Jesus, and you should probably find some type of balance. And for me, it's not a literal one day. Sometimes it's 3 half days, right? So with all that said, I was asking people like, hey, what is it? Why is this an issue for you? And they explained it to me. And then other people were like, listen, we do give. We give above 10%. We just don't think people should feel like they have to give and that their salvation is hanging on, which I agree. And if you go back and listen to it, which you should, I agree on that 100%. So I'm kind of in the middle here, meaning that I believe in generosity. I believe the New Testament requirement is generosity. I believe the New Testament requirement, in my opinion, is probably well and above 10% for the average believer. Because I think if we look at Jesus, he came to fulfill the law. And because he came to fulfill the law, there are everything we thought that was the standard, he elevates it, right? So if we look at the standard of the law, the moral law, and we say, hey, do not commit adultery. Jesus says, you heard it said not do not commit adultery. I tell you, even if you've looked at a woman lustfully and lusted after in her heart, you've committed adultery. Do not kill. I say, even if you've hated your brother, you've killed, right? So when you look at what Jesus is actually saying, we think, I'll give you a modern day example. We'll give him out an example. And we're going to do a topic on this, not to give it away, but this idea of like profanity. A lot of you guys are like, oh, you can't say this word, this 4-letter word, that 4-letter word. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yes, but Jesus said we will give an account for every idle word. Okay? Jesus said he'll give an account for every idle word. Every idle word. And Ephesians 4:28 says that let nothing unwholesome come out of your mouth. Nothing unwholesome out of your mouth. And out of your fingertips as you're typing nasty comments and being divisive in the comment section. Some of y'all need to repent right now, right? Nothing unwholesome come out of your mouth. So I actually believe that the standards of God is way higher than ours, and they're unkeepable. That God's moral law is way above what we think is good, right? So if someone is finding their righteousness and their identity and, ooh, I keep the tithe, hey, you know that you don't get your righteousness from that, right? And God's expectation is you got to surrender, right? So I don't view it as my money. I view it all as God's. So with this idea specifically of the 10% versus whatever, my heart is, listen, what I was saying was, I think it's a good principle, but I don't think you're saved or not saved. I don't think you're in sin or not in sin. I think it's a good principle. And the way we teach it in my house is every dollar that comes in, if my son gets Christmas money, every dollar that comes in, we budget some of it to save, some of it to give, and some of it to spend, right? That like we're pressing that into him very early on. Very early on, before I even understood financial literacy, I understood the value of generosity. I understood the value of generosity. And so no one should be compelled to give. But what you value is represented by what you spend your money on. What you value is represented by what you spend your money on. I value my local church. The spreading of the gospel in my local community is extremely important to me. Extremely important to me. I value that. Therefore, I put my money where my mouth is. And I think this idea of generosity is way above an idea of a 10%, that is really an issue of your heart. And my question to some of you guys, outside of those of you guys that have experienced spiritual abuse, outside of that, right? My question to some of you guys that are hardened to the idea of generosity is why? Like, why are you so hardened? And why can you not detach from your money? Why is it, right? Like, why do you have to hold it and contain it and pull it back? I don't understand that. And I think it's a deeper issue than whether it's a 10% or a 5% or 2% or give, right? But I do say from the New Testament that they gave weekly, which means they gave regularly. I do see them making it a regular thing. And this notion of like, I just kind of give what I want, right? Well, do you just kind of pay rent when you want? Do you just kind of buy clothes when you want? Do you just kind of, right? Like if you just kind of pay for Netflix when you just kind of want, right? That to me shows that you don't really value the things you say you value if you're in a local church, right? Because I don't right? Like I value my Hulu subscription. Guess what? We pay for that regularly. I value what my church is doing. Guess what? We give to that regularly. The amount, is usually well above 10%. It's not about the amount, it's about your heart. So what's the heart? What's the heart? Yes, absolutely not reluctantly or under compulsion. With a cheerful heart, be a cheerful giver. But why? Why are we so hardened to the idea of generosity, right? And I talk about an open hand mentality. It's not mine. Money goes in, money goes out. Money goes in, money goes out. Money goes in, it's not my money anyway, right? Where your treasure is where your heart is. So I don't think the tithes should be used to beat up people. I don't think you have to do anything or have to do it or have to do it off your gross or have to do it off your net. I think we get to partner with God. I think we get to partner with God. And do pastors misrepresent Malachi 3 and misquote Malachi 3? Absolutely. That's not what I'm perpetuating. That's not what I'm pushing here, right? But hey, what you value is reflected by what you spend your money on. So bring it full circle. to this whole Bryson Gray thing. This man's putting out music, is going crazy. We have someone publicly in error on some KJV only, extremely divisive, at the Capitol, minimizing and encouraging some of that stuff. And his audience values him so much that every time this man drops something, they go crazy with it. Now, granted, a lot of them are boomers and still buy music on iTunes. I get it. You don't have to buy my music on iTunes. But right? But every time I see him open up, every time I see him do a live stream, I'm not exaggerating. This man is clearing $300, $400, $500, $1,000 usually in his live streams. Why? Because his people value what he does, as wrong as I think it is, as an error as I think he is. Yet the folks with the healthy theology, right? The folks with the good theology don't see this. They don't want to give to their local church, because that's what I kept asking him, right? I kept asking, hey, what do you give to your local church? How much do you give to I kept asking that question. And some people were like, yeah, we kind of give when we can. And I was like, that's interesting. And others were like, hey, we give 25%. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Why is this such an issue? And they're like, well, because of spiritual abuse, and my grandma still thinks she's not saved if she doesn't tithe. And I was like, okay, well, that's fair. I get it. I understand that, right? So we value where we put our money. Where your heart is, there your treasure is, right? And this is not a ploy for you to give me a super chat. No, that actually makes me uncomfortable a lot of times when I start talking about money. My heart for you guys is go get in a local church. Like, go get in a local church and give. Like, be generous. 10%, 20%, 5%, whatever. Just make it regular, make it consistent, right? And give. And that's another issue are so many of us in positions where maybe because of COVID or maybe because of the issues that we have with church, we're not even in local churches anymore. Right? We're not even in local churches. We're not even in local fellowships. We're not even surrounded by proximity of community. And therefore, we don't want to give to a local church because we're not even a part of it. Okay, that's a whole nother issue. Why aren't you a part of a local fellowship? Right? Why aren't you a part of a local fellowship? It's interesting, right? So this entire conversation of giving, guys, you guys know me. Like, I am not on no, like, you have to do this. You got to do that. You got to do that. Like, no, that's not what I'm on. Like, at all. I'm saying, hey, you get to. And if you've been at churches that have mishandled funds, myself included, yes, I've been there, right? Find a better church. Find a church where it's more transparent. But I don't know about you guys, the folks that are shepherding my local community, I want them taken care of. I want my pastor to not have to worry about food, clothing, and shelter and how he's going to feed his family. I think that's a huge value of mine. I don't know. I think that's important. I think you should desire your pastor to be taken care of as well, right? And so we're looking over and we're thinking, we see people who are in error, but then the ministries that aren't in error, we're reluctant and we're stingy in, and the majority of us aren't even giving to our local, not the majority of us, a lot of us aren't even giving to our local churches. I think there's some unjust scales here. And I don't think it's a percentage issue. I think it's a heart issue. I think you have a heart issue that you could sit through an hour and a half of four men of God that have been walking with Jesus for decades, discuss all of the different nuances of the view. Disagree, mind you, because we did disagree. I didn't go as far as Jason to say you have to say it. We didn't really say that, but he was very like pressing on the tithe. And then I didn't go as far as Pastor Roy to say, hey, you don't have to tithe at all. You can kind of just give when you can, right? We disagreed, and you could sit there through an hour and a half of that and still leave a nasty combative comment and say, well, I don't understand. That's a hard issue, fam. That has nothing to do with what the stream was about. Because what the stream was about was ultimately about handling money God's way and where does giving fit into that. And giving definitely fits into that. So if you're not giving regularly, I don't care what the percentage is. Stop with the percentage. And there's some of you guys that are single moms. There's some of you guys that are on fixed incomes. There's some of you guys that are on disability. I understand. That's different, right? There's some of you guys that have been extremely hit hard because of the vid and the lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. You've lost money. You've taken massive. That's different. I'm talking about the average person who is in a local church getting fed and doesn't want to give. Or doesn't want to give regularly, or wants to kind of give whenever I feel led. You wouldn't apply that to anything else. Yeah, I kind of like sleep whenever I feel led. No, you sleep regularly. You sleep because you should. And if you don't, you play with your sleep, guess what? You're going to be in a really unhealthy place with your lifestyle. You should do these things. Again, it's not about the percentage, it's about the heart. And so to bring it full circle, when we've done studies, this is to bring you some secular research on this. When they've done studies, they've found a few things to be true. Generous people tend to be more attractive, tend to have more opportunity, and tend to do well in the marketplace and in their interpersonal relationships. The attribute of generosity. The attribute of generosity. Without even having Jesus, mind you. People who don't know Jesus but are generous, they're giving, they have an open hand mentality, tend to perform better, and there's a connection there between their dopamine release and its action. So what I say is, I say a lot of God's ways are actually in our best interest. His mind is not like ours, and we look at something and we'll go, ooh, God, you want me to let go of this money thing? But it's actually in your best interest. It's actually in your best interest. This is what the secular data shows, right? This is what the secular data shows. So another example. If we're talking about what creates people to be financially successful, they've done research. If you can live on 75% of what you make, you will be successful financially. What does that mean? That means that if you could set some aside for being giving generous charity, I'm not even, again, secular, I'm not even talking about churches. If you can give 10% and you could save 15%, put it in a retirement, that saving and that budgeting muscle is the very thing that will position you to actually retire as a millionaire. If you put 15%, 10 to 15% of your income to savings, give 10%. The majority of folks who do this from age 20 to age 60 retire extremely comfortable. This is adjusted for inflation and become multimillionaires. This is an absolute fact. It's proven and by the book, The Millionaire Next Door, The Millionaire Mind. The average millionaire walking around is not riding around in a flashy car, right? They're not riding around, right? This actually little incremental habits over decades. And then when they're 60, they're multimillionaires, right? So this stuff is actually in our best interest. It's pragmatic. And so that's the part where I'm like, I tend to lean more on the, hey, we should give, we should be generous. I think 10% is just a good percentage, not that you're made righteous by it. I just think it's a good idea. Yet, you don't have to, but I think it's a good position. I'm not gonna say, oh, it's the floor. I'm not gonna say that to you. And so my question is, why? Why is there a heart issue? And I would lean on the fact that you're missing out. I think you're missing out. I think you're missing out on a financial breakthrough, not because there's a magical percentage of 10%, because if you can learn to live on 90 and then learn to live on 75, you'll be more generous, you'll be more disciplined with your finances, you'll make better career options, you'll do the math and say, I can't keep working this dead-end job, there's more opportunity, I'm more attractive because I'm more generous, I'm a better whole person because I'm more generous, because I have an open hand mentality, opportunity starts to find people want to work with you, right? This is all connected. It's all connected, right? It's all connected. And so, something to think about. Something to think about. Just something to think about. You don't have to agree with me on this, by the way. You really don't. It's just principle. Like, this is just biblical principle, right? So I'm not telling anybody you have to do this, you have to do that. No. I'm not saying any of that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you get to be generous. The life of the believer is generosity. This is demonstrated by the early church. They sold everything. They didn't have to do that, by the way. If you go read the story of Ananias and Sapphira, they didn't have to do that. They got to do that. And they, in that scripture, it's very clear. And then they were deceptive about it. And that's why they got struck down by God. And so I think these things are nuanced, but I think the issue that I see folks just kind of triggered and upset about it, I'm like, wow, I didn't know this was such an issue for so many people. And then when I understand that there's trauma attached to it, there's spiritual abuse attached to it, I get it. I understand that, especially if you're coming from a place of like, hey, I'm a single mom, I have a disability, I'm a fixed income. I get that. I am, this is not a one size fits all solution, but the principle of generosity, the principle of managing and stewarding your wealth well, the principle of getting on a budget, the principle of getting out of debt. I know you guys don't like me talking about getting out of debt. You're like, Ruslan, I wish you wouldn't talk to me about being out. See, the principle of these things are universal, right? That people who are generous, people who are giving, people who are debt free end up thriving even if they don't know Jesus. That's wild to me. That's wild to me. But that's how God set up the universe to work, right? So anyway, what you value, and they say, Pastor Miles always used to say, the last part of a man to get saved is their wallet, right? Like the last part of you that gets saved is your wallet, because you give your heart, you surrender that, but that little distance between your head and your wallet, that's the last part that most of us give over, right? And I'm not making this a salvation. It's just a joke. That's a joke, okay? It's a joke. So it's just funny. This is really interesting to me. So anyway, what do you guys think about it?
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
Joshua the king came down and bore it all. Yeah. Conversations front of the fireplace. All of my mistakes out of I erase. Wanna operate at a higher pace. Birth pains causing the body to dilate. On a first name basis with the worst pain facing.